When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, like Skims or Allbirds, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand, and great marketing. But an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the business, making selling and for shoppers buying simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. It's home of Shop Pay, the #1 checkout in the world. You can use it to boost conversions up to 50%, meaning way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going through to checkout. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout Allbirds uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/income, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/income to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/income.
Hi everyone, I'm Deb Flashenberg. Welcome to Yoga, Birth, Babies, a podcast produced by Prenatal Yoga Center. We will be diving into everything prenatal yoga, birth, and baby related, hoping to inspire, educate, and empower you through your journey into motherhood. Thank you for listening.
Hi, I'm Deb Flashenberg, and I'm your host of Yoga Birth Babies. And today we have another installment of what I'm calling Podcasts from the Vault. So this is a series of some of our most popular, most talked about, most commented on podcasts that I'm bringing out of the vault, dusting off, and re-releasing for you to hear. These are some of my favorite conversations. So for today, we are talking to Gail Tully, and the topic is how to use spinning babies for a smoother, more balanced, and more efficient birth. Because I have never met anyone that said to me, I'd like my birth to be really long and arduous. No one's ever said that. They want their birth to be functional and efficient and move along. So in this conversation, we talk about Gail and what inspired her to develop spinning babies. We talk about the evolution of spinning babies, and then some of the basics about the birthing process and why baby position matters. And then we look at different ways to open the pelvis from the inlet, the mid-pelvis, ischial spines, and the pelvic outlet. We talk about ways that parents can know where their baby is, and then what techniques to use to figure out how to help their baby through the pelvis. This is stuff that we incorporate into our prenatal yoga classes because I was certified through Spinning Babies as a parent educator, so it is something very near and dear to my heart and something I believe in, and things that we incorporate in because I want people to have births that move well and then have the tools to help that. And we also, one thing that's important is some of these tools are not the best fit for everybody. So we talk about contraindications of when not to use these tools and techniques. So you're going to get a really clear idea of the Spinning Babies methodology and when and how to use it. So let me tell you a bit about our guest. I've mentioned her a couple of times. Gail Tully is a midwife in Minneapolis, Minnesota, where she lives with her husband. She's a creator of the Spinning Babies approach, as well as the author of Breech Birth Quick Guide, Spinning Babies, Quick Reference, and Belly Mapping, How Kicks and Wiggles Reveal Your Baby's Position. Well, that may sound like a simplified bio of Gail. She is so rich in knowledge and has contributed so greatly to the perinatal world and supporting healthy, functional, efficient births. And this was my third talk with her, and I was just so excited to reconnect. So I think you're going to get so much out of this conversation. Before we get to my talk with Gail, I always love to give updates about what's happening at Prenatal Yoga Center. So really everything's on the website because I realize I give individual class info, but I just want to point you to the website so you can get all the information about our online classes, our inline classes, our in-studio workshops, our on-demand workshops, and of course about our prenatal yoga teacher training. So head over to prenatalyogacenter.com. You can check out our schedule. You can check out our blog. You can check out our full library of podcasts. So much information there. And as always, I love to wrap this up as just with a thank you to our community for creating what we are and for listening and also for contributing your ideas of who I should talk to and some ideas. I love when people write in and say, oh, I have a friend that would be great on your podcast, or I've been a longtime listener and I want to share my birth story. Those are some of my favorites. So thank you so much. Okay, we're going to take a super quick break. And when we come back, please enjoy my conversation with Gail Tully.
This episode is brought to you by Factor. Ready to optimize your nutrition this year? Meet Factor, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal service. Factor's fresh, never-frozen meals are dietitian approved and ready to eat in just 2 minutes. Their chefs handle the shopping and chopping, delivering fresh, fully cooked meals to your door. All you have to do is heat and enjoy. Choose from 40 weekly options across 8 dietary preferences like Calorie Smart and Protein Plus. And if you're looking to lose weight, Factor's keto meals can help you lose up to 8 pounds in 8 weeks. Savor nutritious, premium meals no matter how busy life gets. Eat smart with Factor. Get started at factormeals.com/factor50off and use code factor50off to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. Weight loss with Factor Keto based on a randomized controlled clinical trial. Results will vary depending on diet and exercise.
Gail, I'm so excited to speak with you. I think this is our 3rd podcast together.
Deb, I was just admiring you and how you do these podcasts. It's fantastic.
It's lots of fun. It serves me as much as a community because I am such a geek that I love learning. So it gives me like the front row opportunity to ask the questions that I want to know. So I'm excited.
Isn't that the truth? And your enthusiasm just makes it all the more fun for those of us listening to your podcast.
That's good. All right. So this is, as I mentioned, our 3rd conversation, but this one I started when I was sitting about thinking, what should we talk about this time? I'm really curious about more like kind of the origins of spinning babies and how it's evolved. So I thought we would start there because, as you know, I did the parent educator training. I'm still working on that, but I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of spinning babies as part of my teaching, but I want to pick your brain a little bit deeper. So, all right, let's start with, why don't you tell folks about yourself and what inspired spinning babies?
Deb Flashenberg. Well, first of all, come on, get your certification for your parent educator.
I know.
You so deserve that.
Thanks.
And I would say the real origins of spinning babies started in an apple tree when I was 5 years old. And my dear little best friend and another neighbor, the 3 of us were like 4 and 5 years old, and we were sitting in the apple tree, and both of their mothers had recently had babies. And I was the youngest child in my family. And I said to them, what did I say? Yeah, where do babies come from? I must have said. But I remember the young neighbor's response. The doctor cuts them out of the mother's side.
Oh.
And I was like, I had a flash. It was like a download of history. I just seemed like things were zipping past me. And my mom had bought the Time Life books that had geography and history and human evolution and all these things. And while I couldn't read the words, I looked at the pictures. And I talked to my older siblings about the pictures. And I got the sense that the scalpel was a relatively recent invention compared to birth, compared to the history of birth. And therefore, babies were being born before the invention of the scalpel. And I said somehow I had this just reverberating in my brain. And I said to my friend, I don't think so. And she said, yes, I've seen the scar. My mother showed me the scar. And in those days, they wouldn't even say the word belly to a child. So that's why her mother said her side, because belly was way too intimate a word, or abdomen, or, Of course, you wouldn't have said uterus, but now today, of course, we would. And I thought about that, and it put a lot of questions into my head that I spent my life thinking about. One, what are we doing here on earth? But two, how do babies get born? And then years later, I was a young mother myself, and I really enjoyed my birth. I didn't have any issues with fetal rotation. That wasn't part of the story, but that I loved birth and I loved being a mother. And then years go forward, and I was a doula. And I was a doula for a woman who had had a cesarean for her first baby, 9-pound, 12-ounce baby. And the doctor said, well, look at your hips. Of course you had a cesarean for a 9-pound, 12-ounce baby. That's a big baby. And though she felt somewhat resigned after her birth, when she got pregnant a second time, she felt like, wait a minute, just because I have narrow hips doesn't mean I shouldn't be able to have a baby. I see other mothers with narrow hips. Hips can be wider, hips can be narrow. I think I can try to have this second baby. So she took the Bradley childbirth classes, very popular in the 1980s, very effective. She went to a nurse midwife at the hospital. They were still rather new in the 1980s to have a midwife in the hospital. And she asked me to come along. We weren't even using the word doula yet. I was coming along as someone interested in physiological birth in the hospital setting, as a companion, as a peer. And she told me, I'm going to give birth in the morning. I'm going to go into labor at night and give birth in the morning. Well, the morning came and went, and her baby hadn't come yet. And she started to get a bit bewildered and perplexed, like, wait a minute, this is going beyond my expectation. I knew a little bit about birth positioning and support. So, we did the things that were common of the day, the pelvic tilts, pelvic rocking, slow dancing, walking sideways up and down the stairs, simply kneeling, leaning over furniture. The next morning, she said, well, it's morning, so let's go to the hospital. Because babies are born in the hospital. So when I get to the hospital, my baby will be born. But the baby wasn't. And we went through that day. And she slow danced and pelvic tilted and walked. And we even went and walked in the hospital stairway. And the nurse came when we were back in the room. The nurse said, when your baby turns around, your baby will come. And I thought about that, and I had read about posterior labors, and I'd been to some, but they hadn't slowed down enough, because not all posterior labors do. And the posterior labor is the sunny side up. The baby's facing forward, but not only facing forward, Deb, the baby's chin is away from its chest, and that sets the longer part of the baby's head into the pelvis. Mm-hmm. I know you know this, but your listeners might be trying to visualize why is this an issue and what are we talking about here? And so with her sunny side up baby, the nurse said, when your baby turns around, your baby will come. Well, when the baby turns around, they're also tucking their chin and they're fitting through the pelvis more readily. And the pelvis and the baby will fit so that the pelvis and the muscles turn the baby through the pelvis like a key unlocking the door of birth. And in time and with strong contractions, her body opened, her baby came down, and she crawled onto the bed on her hands and knees and pushed out another 9-pound, 12-ounce baby. Mm. So she had her second baby exactly the same size as her first, the first by cesarean, the second on her own power. And this really gave us the message about her body could give birth. But fetal positioning matters. The baby's position is linked to how easy or long, challenging the birth is. Mm-hmm. It's not the only reason, but it is the most common reason. So I went on a journey to try to figure out what could I learn to help people with posterior labors have an easier time. And in answering that question, I look for what are favorite birth positions? What are attitudes that we could have? Is it in the attitude? I saw patient people giving birth quickly or in a long labor. Is it the person's size? I saw tiny people giving birth to large babies, some without any issues and some with great effort. So size wasn't completely the answer either. So what was the answer? And it really led me to fetal positioning, and how to help fetal positioning led me to anatomy, birth anatomy. Mm. And I've been on that road ever since.
I love that. It resonates so much with me and how I teach and for my own births. It's just so exciting because then when we hear that, we can recognize it's not something that we have to throw our hands up in the air and be like, I'm a small person, that baby's never going to fit. It's about anatomy is fluid, and we're not, our bodies are fluid, and so are babies. So then if we work them together and balance it, it can help a larger baby out of a smaller space if we take the blockades out.
In fact, sometimes a little bit of a larger baby has an easier birth than a smaller baby. Mm. Have you ever seen that, Deb?
I don't know. I mean, I've seen all sides. I'd say most of the babies I've seen are 7+ pounds. I don't often feel like I've seen much smaller. So,
Deb, when here in Minnesota, where corn grows in the fields and milk is served at every meal, we think a 7-pound baby is undernourished. We're like, what? This baby's only 7 pounds. What did I do?
All right, so I'd say the average baby that I've seen is like 7. Like a 9-pound baby is like a big baby for what I've seen. So maybe my New York City perspective is different.
9 pounds is like the beginning of normal here.
All right. That is interesting. Cause I'd say my range is like 7 to 9. I don't feel like I've seen two. Every now and then I remember one was almost 10, and that was a huge deal.
I mean, seriously? Okay. Well, when we get up past 11 pounds, we're getting impressed.
Oh,
here.
Geez.
That's corn and milk. That's what happens. You have those sugars in your system, you get a big baby. It's not that I'm recommending that. I think you can have a very healthy 7-pounder. I had a 7-pounder myself, and I caught him before he hit the floor.
My second was 7 and my first was 8, and I thought he was enormous.
Well, see, I had an 8-pounder and then a 7-pounder, and I thought the 7-pounder was so tiny.
Oh my goodness. So this is so interesting. So that's what inspired Spinning Babies, but how has it evolved from where it's been to, I feel like as an observer, because for a while I just kind of watched Spinning Babies until I really dove into the program. It seems like it's been refined throughout the years. Tell me a little bit about that.
I teach what I want to learn. So the evolution of Spinning Babies has really reflected my learning path. And I started out, with that question, how can I help birth be easier? And of course, I was attending birth. So at the same time, the evolution of the doula was occurring, right? We had people starting to attend their neighbors and friends' births in the hospital. Not too often in those days, but starting. And then by the 90s, we had the Doulas of North America was founded, the first national and international doula organization. There were local ones like the PALS, is where Donna came out of in Seattle. And on the East Coast, where you are, Deborah Pascali-Bonaro had Mother's Health. What was it called? Mother Love, I think. Probably the first doula organization. It was a private doula organization in the United States. Maybe the first in the world for for this formal idea of the doula, which is a hybrid of the community elders, right? It's a modern version of the community elders that would help the birthing women in the community. So anyway, I went to Penny's doula course. I had already been a doula trainer with a different group, just starting out, and I went to Penny's. In fact, I invited Penny to Minneapolis area so I could take her workshop. And I was transformed by the model. And Penny was a physical therapist, so there were birth positions happening, and she was very reflective and very up to date with all the literature. So this was a great influence in my life. And she had these birth positions and ideas for helping comfort and progress in labor. In fact, she's got a wonderful book on labor progress. So I started to listen to Penny and think, how do I apply this to help birth be easier? And as I did and was going to births using Penny's suggested position, I started to realize that there could be a system for how these positions were done. Now we're coming to, so I started to write about that at the end of the 90s. And now it's 2001. And I've been writing and having people read some chapters. I haven't published this book yet. I've still wanted to learn more. So I got together some doulas and midwife friends of mine, and I gave them a little presentation that I called Spinning Babies. Here's some ideas about how to help the posterior baby come through the pelvis easier, the woman with the posterior labor having an easier time. What do you think? Because I don't want to put a book out and have my peers think I'm ridiculous, you know? And they loved it. And I've been doing workshops ever since. And I haven't had time to get to that book, but I'll tell you, I got to now. And it's been 20 years thinking about it. So we had birth positions, and then I evolved that to when to do what, which we usually pick birth positions on custom or what's our favorite. I'm going to recommend the favorite birth position. The bed in the middle of the room shows people to get in and lay down or maybe sit back. Just by having it be a bed, that sort of is the message. But the pelvis is designed for upright birth. So some people kneel on the bed and lean over the back of the bed and use the bed in different ways. Or they stay on the floor with their feet on the floor and find different positions. And I wanted to know, when do we use these positions? Because they don't all work equally throughout any time in labor. Some work better at certain times in labor. And then we went through a change. Some change has happened in our physiology, Deb. Around the year 2005, we went from being able to help baby's position be easier simply by how we sat or rested, how we moved. And now that's more challenging. And what it seems, the need seems to be to help babies in an ideal curled up position is better range of motion than the average person has. So we want to improve range of motion and develop long, supple muscles like you do in your yoga class. Mm-hmm. The yoga, particularly that uses a slow, static stretch, holds the pose and uses props for good alignment. Good alignment is very important for the joints, but it's also a way using the props helps the muscle both be engaged and relaxed in sort of a balanced way. And it's developing longer muscles and more flexible joints, but support, because comfort comes from flexibility and stability, that balance between flexibility and stability. So When a person is following either their yoga or they're doing some, if they don't like yoga, but they're doing some kind of similar stretches and similar movements rather than vigorous exercise, which tends to put us towards a high tonality or tense short muscles. So we're looking for long, supple muscles like the willow tree compared to the oak tree. We want to be able to bend in the wind. We want to be able to move with labor. That's that feminine strength, is the suppleness.
Yeah, I absolutely see that. So one of the things that I absolutely love about spinning babies is I feel like it's like a roadmap with tools to help labor progress, because as you're saying, like where baby is and how we open the pelvis at different parts are going to affect things. It's not just like a water slide that everything shoots through. You know, we have at the beginning of labor, we need to open the inlet. Then we've got the mid pelvis, which I call the ischial spines, the baby speed bumps, because they slow they slow things down. They're like a little speed bump. And then we've
and then we got the outlet. Yeah. You know that the baby speed bump, we think about it as the bony pelvis because we've been taught it's the bony pelvis, right? Because we can see it.
Yeah.
The doctors started measuring it in the end of the 1800s. But the same place where the ischial spines are right next door to them is the pelvic floor.
Yeah.
And the pelvic floor goes lower too, but that's where the baby starts to enter the layers of the pelvic floor.
Well, those are speed bumps for some of us too, because there's tension and there's torsion. Yeah. So knowing that we can utilize different positions depending on where baby is working its way through the pelvis, what are ways that parents can start to see that and utilize that, because they may not know where baby is?
Well, that's because that question hasn't really been addressed. Is the baby engaged or not? Has been. That has been a popular question because of the importance of the baby tucking its head into the opening of the pelvis at the top at the very end of pregnancy or early labor. But spinning babies, or myself as the creator of spinning babies, is the first time baby's route has been systemized according to where in the pelvis. In other words, nobody was paying attention to how we match birth positions to where is baby. That question was not a common question in how to help labor progress, and it still isn't. So parents will be surprised if they go to the hospital in labor and they say to the nurse, doctor, midwife, well, where's my baby? You know, if you want my labor to progress, tell me where my baby is. And the provider may or may not know that. And the good news is you can tell yourself by sensations in your body. And if the nurse does share that information, say they do a vaginal exam, they can say, is baby high? Is baby right in the center, right where you expect it? Or do we see baby and we're getting ready to catch the baby? Okay, so you know, is baby high or not? And are we getting ready to catch the baby? So I systemized what to do based on the anatomy. And the anatomy can be the bony pelvis, like those baby speed bumps of the ischial spines. It can be the soft tissue, like the pelvic floor that's like a funnel for turning the baby's head. And there's lots of other parts of the anatomy too. So then we match our position. We open the top of the pelvis in early labor once contractions are regular, or if they're not regular, we can help them get regular. And we open the bottom. That's when we would squat. When the baby is well into the pelvis or on their way out, we can lunge and squat. But when the baby's trying to get in, lunging and squatting are going to hold the baby back unless the baby's small enough to come through anyway. So think about it this way. You've got a circle at the top. The circle could be wider side to side. It could be triangular, but it's basically somewhat circular. And the wide part of the baby's head is coming into that circle. So we want to make that circle bigger while baby's head is coming through it. But once baby's head is through the inlet and is coming down in the lower parts of the pelvis, the things that make the circle at the lower part of the pelvis bigger make the circle at the top smaller.
Mm-hmm.
When we make the circle at the top bigger, we make the circle at the bottom smaller. It works like a clothespin. You pinch the top closed and the bottom opens. You can put it around your clothes and the clothesline, and then you let go of the top and the top opens and the bottom shuts. And that's how the pelvis works.
Which I find fascinating. That's why we need to remind people that it's not, I think we feel like skeletons and bones. So obviously we know like our joints move, but I don't think people think that the pelvis has joints too. And it's fluid. It moves. It's not stuck. And I think when we can remind ourselves that, it can give us that empowerment of like, I can move my body to help my baby find its space. I find that so exciting. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, if you can give a couple of poses that would open the inlet, the mid, and the outlet so that people walking away, obviously they're going to go to your website and study it and take all your classes. But if they could just get in their head just a couple of ideas.
While we're taking a break, they can go to spinningbabies.com and look at go to spinningbabies.com and search for opening the inlet.
All right, so we'll take a quick break. You listeners, go look at that and come right back. We'll be right back.
En los viernes de papitas gratis, llévate unas papitas medianas con una compra mínima de $1 en el app de McDonald's y guarda esa reserva secreta para después, como en 2 minutos. Para pa pa pa. Válida los viernes una vez al día hasta el 12:30 y 1.25 en McDonald's participantes. Excluye impuestos. Debes haberte registrado en Rewards.
Lowe's knows that free is just better. That's why MyLowe's Rewards is free to join. As a member, you earn points towards MyLowe's money on eligible purchases, get exclusive free gifts, and earn free shipping at Silver Key status, all on top of weekly member-only deals. Don't wait. Join MyLowe's Rewards for free today and start saving more. Lowe's, we help, you save. Loyalty program subject to terms and conditions. Details at lowes.com/terms. Subject to change.
Okay, we are back. All right. So, Gail, give me 1 or 2 poses to open or positions to open the inlet, the mid, and the base.
That is so great. So when we are opening the top of the pelvis, let's say we're standing. You can do it in your chair if you're sitting. If you're driving and listening to this, you can even do it driving a car. But pay attention to the outside world, please. Simply tuck your tailbone under and flatten your lower back into the chair behind you. Or if you're standing, your knees will slightly bend. And that curve in your lumbar, that curve in your lower back, flattens outward. You're pushing that out so that there's no curve there. And that brings your tummy in. And if you feel your tailbone come forward, or the back, your lower back goes backwards to the posterior. That's why it's called a posterior pelvic tilt. It's kind of how you would sit back in your couch to watch Netflix or Hulu or something. You're kind of in that position. Now, the difference is you're up on your sits bones while you're doing this, or you're standing. You could be on hands and knees and do this. And that makes room at the top of the pelvis. If you were to think about, can I get really frank here? Can I get really obvious?
Yeah.
I love how our approved trainer, midwife Rachel Shapiro, says that tuck your tailbone under. Can you poop like that? And you know that your buttocks are pulled in tighter. So no, this would not be your position on the toilet.
Yeah.
Now let's do the opposite to open the bottom. We see the baby's head. You're going to make more of a curve in your lower back and tip your tailbone to the wall behind you. Flare the tailbone out. Make your booty big. Your tummy comes forward. Your bottom goes backwards, and you have a big curve in your lower back. that relaxes your bottom muscles, makes space between your cheeks. Can you poop like that? That would be the position you might use if you were squatting in the woods.
Makes sense.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's called an anterior pelvic tilt. Why? Because you're moving that big bone at the top of the sacrum, which is in your lower back. You're moving it anteriorly or forward. That's what makes the curve in your back bigger. You don't have to remember anterior and pelvic or posterior pelvic tilts, but for those of you that are do exercise, do yoga, do things with your body, you might like to know those names. Doulas might like to know those names. But it's, obviously you can have a baby without knowing the names of the anatomy or the names of the positions.
So that's good for opening this. We had more of the posterior pelvic tilt to open the inlet where the baby goes in, the top, and then more of the anterior pelvic tilt and a little widening of the sit bones for the outlet. What about the mid pelvis?
One of my favorite positions for the mid pelvis would be a side lunge. Mm-hmm. And when we see lunges on social media, folks, hey, you're showing front lunges to be a side lunge. No, that's not going to help the baby out. The knee has to go off to the side, and you have to be looking in a different direction than your knee. You're looking forward, your knee goes out to the side, and your knee is right over your ankle. If you don't have your foot directly under your knee to start in a neutral position, you're going to hurt your knee ligaments. So alignment's important. And then we just rock the knee forward, but not past our toes. So we can rock back, but when we rock forward, we stop the knee at the toe so that we're only going a little bit forward. And that's to protect the softening. That's to protect the ligaments of pregnancy because they're soft in pregnancy. You could easily hurt those ligaments in the knee.
I love that you're talking about the lunge and you were really specific because the 5th birth I did as a doula, my client had a posterior baby, and my mentor said, you have to do lunges, and she didn't specify. And I was having her do like what I thought were like forward lunges. And I was having her lunge walk around the room. And I'm like, this isn't doing anything. And she's like, my thighs are burning. And I'm like, we have to keep lunging. So I still remember it.
Exactly. And people are doing that still. And, a forward lunge can help the psoas on the other side of the body, right?
That is very true. But that could hold up baby. Let's face it. Psoas definitely plays a role. But I think glad you're clear.
The inlet. That would be for the inlet, and we do them kneeling so that we have a little more control. And you can go to the daily activities on the Spinning Babies website and see these techniques. And we also have techniques for the soft tissues because we have 3 principles of Spinning Babies: balance, gravity, and movement. We're talking right now about gravity and movement, but I prioritize doing body balancing first, so that the lunges and the pelvic tilts are going to be more effective for more people. For some people, they've got it. They've got the flexibility. They've got the range of motion in their joints, or they have the balance in their pelvic floor. But let's face it, pelvic floors get twisted from sudden stops or falls and gravity, or how we do our exercises, or how we sit with our legs crossed. So we need to restore the balance that our body's designed for so our babies slip out more easily.
So let's talk a little bit about, so this is great. You've given some information about mobility and balancing the pelvis, talked a little bit about balancing the pelvic floor, but how are you seeing this being embraced in the medical field? Because I remember early on doing a birth, and one of my favorite doctors was there, and I'm like, what position's a baby in? And she's like, it doesn't matter. And I felt so deflated and slightly embarrassed because I was talking so much about it with my clients, and then I felt slightly dismissed. Are you finding more of the traditional medical model embodying this concept of balancing and readjusting baby, or is there still just a focus on power of contractions?
You have both right now. We're seeing emerging awareness of the fascia, the connective tissue, and how it supports or inhibits the movement of our muscles and our joints. We're seeing budding curiosity in soft tissues. We see a lot of focus on the pelvic floor right now. And you know what? When a doctor says the baby's position doesn't matter, that's a clue into the culture of obstetrics or midwifery, because midwives will say it too. And listen, it has been throughout the medical literature from the 1800s until now. Baby's position matters. In fact, the very second published book in the Western world, the first was the Gutenberg Bible. The second was a book on breech birth. So baby's position has always been very important. And the amount of literature on the posterior presentation of the baby is immense, all saying it matters very much. When a doctor at a birth says it doesn't matter, it's a clue that they don't know what to do about it. So what they mean by it doesn't matter is, since some of those babies are going to turn on their own and some of them won't, we'll just wait and see. And we'll go until somebody's exhausted or somebody's vital signs are dipping, the baby's, getting fetal distress. Then we'll do a cesarean, or we'll go until pushing. And if pushing doesn't work, we'll do a cesarean. That's what they mean by it doesn't matter. Now, does that matter to the person giving birth? I think so. I think it matters to the baby too. And because who would you rather have a birth in a night or a day and a night or in 2 or 3 days time? It matters. And what's lacking in obstetrics is physiological birth. The obstetrician is highly skilled in helping when there is a problem, when there is disease. And we have a society that wants the highest expertise, but we want to do it naturally or as close to naturally as we can. Would we go to the drugstore to get bread, or would we go to the hardware store to get a loaf of bread? If you want a physiological birth, go to somebody who's an expert in physiological birth. And if it turns out that you need higher level of care, an obstetrician in this country is not far away. Mm-hmm. And for a healthy person, they might start with somebody who's skilled in physiological birth and keep an open relationship to an expert in surgical birth. You see what I mean?
Yeah. You know what I found interesting, just kind of juxtaposing? I've taken several spinning babies classes. I think one was like 8 years ago, and then several recently. And I remember the first one I went to out in Long Island, I think Lorenzo was the teacher. It was mainly yoga teachers and some massage therapists and some physical therapists. But the more recent ones I've been going to, there's a lot more nurses. In fact, one that I took last year, maybe last May, I thought there'd be other yoga teachers. I was the only one, and everyone else was a labor and delivery nurse. And I thought that was really exciting. I mean, I was a little surprised that I knew more anatomy than them. But besides that, I was.
Well, that's true. The yoga teacher, the exercise teacher, who's been at it, especially as professionally as you have, is well versed in anatomy because you're working with the anatomy. The nurse and the nurse midwife and even the doctor, they get the basic anatomy of the pelvis and the basic anatomy of the organs. But unless they make a decision to go deeply into anatomy, they really don't know that much about anatomy.
That
and they don't use it.
Yeah. But I was just so excited to see that all of them were L&D nurses bringing this back to wherever they were working. And that was just so invigorating, knowing that it's not just the doula or the yoga teacher that can help the parents with this, but if the nurse is actually there on the labor and delivery floor can utilize this, I think it can help turn a lot more babies and make more birth more functional across the board. I was just so thrilled about that.
It's really fun. It depends on who's the organizer. So I would suspect your first organizer with so many body workers there was probably a yoga teacher or body worker. But nowadays, especially because we just went through COVID, so a lot of our public workshops were closed or postponed. But who could have a workshop? Was a hospital that had a workshop just for its labor and delivery staff. So they're already working together, and they felt comfortable coming together for in-house workshop. Mm-hmm. And those workshops continued through 2020 and 2021 into today. And the nurses really love spinning babies because these are nurses that want to do something with the parents. The parents want a vaginal birth. The nurse wants to support them in a vaginal birth. And they need tools. They need activities that they can do. And the nurse can help facilitate these stretches and these positions. And within 15 minutes to an hour, you have an entirely different labor pattern. You have more ease, less pain, more progress. And it's notable.
Well, let's actually talk about what somebody, so say they don't have a doula with them and they're with their support team. What are some signs they should look at that labor is stalled out a little? And then what technique might you invite them to explore?
Oh boy, this is a great question. So I'm a pregnant person. I've gone into labor. I'm deciding when to go to the hospital or not.
And labor is a bit dysfunctional. Like your labor pattern's a little all over the place.
It's all over the place. I don't know really what to expect.
Correct.
I get to the hospital and I say, give me some help. And I go in and they're assessing. They're going to do a vaginal exam to see what my cervix is doing, if they can find the baby's head. They're going to be listening to the baby and noting the contractions and how close or far apart they are. And maybe the nurse shares with me, we're waiting for contractions to get more regular. Or she might say, these contractions aren't coming at regular intervals. And I might say, but they're so strong, I must be having my baby. And they might say, no, your cervix isn't changing. We're going to send you home. Oh my goodness. What we hope is that someone can do some body balancing activities with this person. If they have to do it on their own, there are some things you can do on your own, but a lot of these body balancing activities you do with somebody. If you had to do it on your own, you could do some yoga leg stretches with straps, and hopefully they're doing that through pregnancy so they don't have to do it in labor. They'll be ready for it once you get to labor. But the sideline release, the forward leaning inversion, the jiggle are typically done by a helper. I could jiggle my own thigh. I can jiggle my own hip. If I were, let's say I was in the bathtub and I could jiggle my hip to the side. Or if I were in bed, I could lay on my side and jiggle my upper hip.
Well, say they have a partner that's working on the jiggle with them. Can you talk about that? Because that's relatively new in the spinning babies. I know that took the place of the rebozo.
Yeah, what I noticed was years ago, I was looking for traditional techniques that were used around the world. What I mean by traditional was what survived the centuries. I figured those were probably effective techniques. And every part of the world, not necessarily every culture, but every part of the world incorporated some type of jiggle to help labor progress. Well, let's come forward to 2017, 17 years after I started spinning babies. Research came out on the fascia. So we had been noting that jiggle has been effective. But now there's research to say that the fascia, the connective tissue that envelops the whole body, responds in 4 ways. And one of those ways is a jiggle. And it's oscillating. It's not a shake. It's a jiggle, like jiggling jello or oscillating, rippling fluid. Well, when you first start jiggling your thigh, if you're laying down, like you could be sitting here, you could just put your hand on the top of your thigh and just start giving it a little bit of vibration. And at first it's kind of stiff and awkward, but you just relax your hand, hold your hand wide and keep jiggling and keep jiggling. And after a minute or 2 minutes, you start to feel that it is much easier. It's far easier. And then if you think about trying to get fluid to ripple back into your hand, relax your elbow, relax your shoulder, get in a comfortable position where you can hang out and keep jiggling. And now you start to feel that the ripples go closer to your knee and closer to your hip. And you keep jiggling, and you realize these ripples are going all the way into your knee joint and all the way up to your hip joint. And if you're laying down or in the bathtub, you might start to feel that jiggle go up into the abdomen. And in a pregnant belly, that means the jiggle's going into the fascia surrounding the uterus. Now, we're not shaking. It's really important. We don't want to be shaking. We're jiggling. We're making a vibration. It's as relaxing as the car ride in a sunny day. And we get that jiggling going and, 10 minutes. And now we've invited our parasympathetics to activate, and we've calmed our body. We've relaxed our broad ligament. We've relaxed our pelvic floor. We've relaxed our hamstrings and our quads and our glutes, and we're starting to feel pretty good.
I love the jiggle, and I've taught that in class, and I can't say I get the best response from students after, because I think sometimes they look like the sideline release and they're like, oh my gosh, that's, it's a lot more complicated. But the jiggle, I feel like the partners can get, they're more confident with that. Cause in yoga class, I'll have them just gently just touch their thighs and do like a little jiggle. I say about panna cotta. I like to use Jello. I'm like, it's like you have a little panna cotta and just the best little jiggle. And students say they feel that they really can take ownership of that, and it's easy for the partners to do. And I have one student, she's like, every time I do it, I feel it in my pelvic floor. I'm like, great, go for it.
Yes, exactly.
And
repeating it is so great because you hold the effect longer in your body.
It's one of my favorites, and I think it's just so accessible. But are there any contraindications to the jiggle or any of the techniques?
Well, the contraindications are individual to each technique. So for the jiggle, it's how hard are people jiggling and where are they jiggling? So we don't jiggle the belly as amateurs. And we don't shake. That's the main thing with the jiggle. We would avoid it in, like as a doula or a non-professional body worker that has a lot of awareness about the fascia and the effects. I wouldn't jiggle in first trimester. I wouldn't jiggle if there's unknown bleeding from the vagina. But if you're doing the gentle jiggle the way we recommend it, so gentle, like a vibration, you can jiggle the thighs, and the buttocks. That's what we're talking about. And jiggle long enough for it to go through the body. Now, for sideline release or going upside down, there are some. If sideline release is a wonderful activity, but we don't do it when there's hypermobility. And we don't do it if there's, again, bleeding from the vagina. In going upside down, we also tend to skip the first 12, 13 weeks of pregnancy. And we don't do it if there's bleeding. I think if you have to be a little bit careful with forward leaning inversion where you do it. Let's say it's a second baby and things are going slow. You're at home and you want to wait to go to the hospital until things speed up. But you've already given birth once. If you do forward-leaning inversion at 10 o'clock at night after a day of contractions, you may be having the baby on the couch. The baby could come suddenly. Why? Because your body's already given birth. Contractions have been regular all day, but they aren't picking up. So the body's ready, and it's just waiting for something to align the uterus and the pelvis. So maybe you want to either go into the hospital where you're planning to give birth or have the midwife come to your home if you're planning a home birth, and then do forward-leaning inversion, and then do sideline release, because things will pick up.
Yeah.
Most cases, things are going to pick up, but they're going to be less painful. You're going to be in a better mental state after doing activities that gently stretch and release the area of tissues where your parasympathetic nervous system ends, and the cervix, the pelvis are areas where the end of the parasympathetic nerves terminate. And therefore, when you balance those areas, you get a lovely relaxation.
And that's how we want to birth. We want to birth in that parasympathetic. So you were mentioning the forward-leaning inversion. I want to talk a little bit about that because I've had students talk about this with me. And will you talk a little bit about the difference in intention and usage of the forward-leaning inversion to create balance in the soft tissue, as opposed to using this technique to turn a breech baby?
Yeah, you're asking really advanced questions. This is great. So first of all, forward-leaning inversion is a special way of getting upside down very carefully and smoothly, so we're not jolting the body. That gives us gentle stretch to ligaments to the uterus and the fascia that's like a sock lining the pelvis, like a sock lines a shoe, so to speak. And so it's helping those structures align. And become more fluid, less stiff, more supple, and to, in pregnancy line up, and in birth line up and let the baby through. So people think going upside down is only to get the baby out of the pelvis, and that can be used that way. But forward-leaning inversion is for 30 seconds, or in labor, 1 minute, one contraction. And then you're coming up for the alignment of the uterus and the ligaments and everything, and for the flexibility. So we can use it for gravity, but we're using it for function. And that's different than the breech tilt, where we go upside down on the ironing board. So to if you're going to help a breech baby go head down, let's say you're in the 3rd trimester, you want your baby to be head down, you would do forward-leaning inversion for 30 seconds first, and then hang out on the breech tilt for, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and repeat that a few times a day. Is that answering your question?
Yeah. I have to tell you, I did a private session with somebody recently, and she's like, but I'm in New York. I don't have an ironing board. I'm like, this is true.
And ironing boards today are made out of flimsy metal. I still have my grandmother's wooden ironing board. And I'm telling you, this board is probably from the 40s. I don't know, but it's solid. And yeah, so an inversion board would work, which is an entirely different animal, or go to the hardware store and get a bookshelf.
That's a good idea.
Make it the baby's bookshelf afterwards.
Oh my gosh, this has been so good. Okay, we're going to take another. Okay, as we start to wrap up, is there anything else about the spinning babies technique that I didn't ask that you want to share before I start to wrap us up?
We're really parent-centered. We empower the parents to understand their own birth anatomy, their physiology, and work with their own body to get comfort in pregnancy and ease in their birth. It's great when the nurses know it, but the parents can know it, and there are adaptations on our on our website for people who have to do it by themselves. Like, what can they do when they don't have a helper? There's plenty to do that don't need a helper, and there's plenty to have your birth partner be your hero. It's very empowering to partners, whether that partner is your intimate partner or your mother, sister, friend, or doula. And I really recommend getting a doula or getting some social support for pregnancy. We want easier birth because we want to empower that moment of mother-child bonding, attachment, to bring the baby to the breast, to the chest, to, back to your heart. The best baby position is that they're at your heart, on the other side of birth, so that you can have that skin-to-skin contact right after. That has been proven to be so important for how we do the next part of our lives, for us as parents and for our children. So if that has to be interrupted, that can be recreated later when you can be with your baby once again. But if you have an easier birth, that skin-to-skin contact is not to be missed. It's bliss.
It is.
And that's why we're doing this. And we want to invite parents and providers to the Spinning Babies Confluence, because we're going to have an open dialogue. The power in Spinning Babies is we put people together that wouldn't normally be together at our workshops and in our concepts. So we want parents and professionals talking together. We have a special low price day for parents.
I'm actually going to have you we're going to take another break, but then I want you to share everything about that. Okay, so we're going to take a break. When we come back, as we wrap up, I'm going to have you offer one final tip or piece of advice to new or expectant parents, and then I want you just to let loose and talk about your upcoming confluence. We'll be right back.
In a world where single moms face countless challenges, the Single Mom Podcast offers a space of support and empowerment. Each episode offers stories of triumph, practical strategies, and heartfelt support to those on the journey of solo parenting. With a touch of humor and a wealth of inspiration, this podcast invites single moms everywhere to join a community that understands and uplifts. Discover the power of shared experiences and the strength of single mothers, because together they are truly unstoppable.
Okay, we are back. So what is one final tip or piece of advice you'd like to offer new and expectant parents?
Breathing.
Ooh, yes.
Really, I want to bring breathing back to birth. There is so much science on the power of breathing, and an easy resource is HeartMath Institute. I think it's excellent to have a flow in your in-breath and out-breath, and to match your movements with your breath. I think that's my advice. And then
tell people where to find you. Tell people all about your confluence.
Yeah. We're at spinningbabies.com, and then you can look under events and find our conference page. And we're doing Changing Birth in Times of Changing Earth. And so much is changing right now in our economies, in our climate, in our policies, in how we connect with one another. And we want to face this future together. Our paradigm is physiology before force. We've invited providers to understand physiology better in birth, instead of just being patient and thinking, oh, we've been giving birth for 120 million years. Why do we need to do anything special? On one hand, and on the opposite is birth is an emergency, and we have to be ready for a disaster at every minute. In fact, we have to be so ready, we're just going to cut the baby out before we think about it. We got those two extremes, and Spinning Babies gives a third alternative of really knowing our physiology better. As I explore this, I see that we're much more resilient when we're coming from our physiology. And we can come from our physiology when our physiology is part of our language and our lifestyle. So we have a very exciting speaker, Yvette Erasmus, who's going to be talking about the basically the physiology of communication, how to have nonviolent communication and connection communication. We have for our Saturday, for our parents, we're having this communication. It's for providers as well. And then I'm going to talk about belly mapping, how parents can estimate their baby's position, understand their baby's position better. We're going to be having a Friday for providers, a day of body work. We're going to, we have some wonderful trainers with skills that are going to be coming. We have a Kristen Hosaka, a chiropractor, talking about the sacrum in labor and how even the doula can observe the subtle signs of progress by seeing what the sacrum is doing. We have midwife and approved trainer Rachel Shapiro Davies talking about the role of the round ligaments, very high level anatomical investigation of round ligaments, really on the anatomist level.
I'm getting so excited about this.
Yeah. And then we have a roundtable discussion with midwife Rhea Williams, nurse Nikki Zerfus, and midwife Emma Moreland on how to use bodywork in the birth setting. This is going to be really great for how do we really go into this body balancing during labor. Lindsay McCoy, our friend from Body Ready Method, is going to be talking about the yielding pelvic floor, how to encourage a Goldilocks pelvic floor, not too tight and not too loose. Maggie Walker is doing some yoga for all. So when parents come, they're going to be able to do, they're going to be able to watch this for 90 days. Well, everybody's going to be watching it for 90 days after the weekend of the conference so they can review these and get little yoga stretches. So you've got your yoga classes.
I've got a few little yoga segments that everyone can do. Yeah. And especially if you're, when I sit in front of a computer for a while, I get all stiff. So little yoga snacks.
Yes. And we are very honored to have Deb Flaschenberg's yoga bites, so yummy. Our approved trainer and friend, midwife Nicole Morales, wants us to observe the whole instead of the whole. And Runa Kakolis is going to talk about labor dystocia and poor physiological maintenance favors for prodromal labor. Okay, on day 2, the day with the parents, we have Yvette Erasmus, as I said, getting to flow, communication and physiology, connecting with self and others. Boom. That is such a great, powerful, it's life-changing. 90 minutes with activities that we're going to do in communication. And I'm going to come and show my belly mapping method and perceptive palpation. So for parents and for providers, because belly mapping is for parents, but perceptive palpation is for providers. And then midwife Emma Moreland, our new trainer, is going to present the forward-leaning inversion so parents can do it safely and properly and why. And then midwife Anna Maria Rossetti and midwife Tema Mercata are going to come together in a chat room on physiological birthing in progress, how not to disturb the birth. Midwife Claire Eccleston from New Zealand is talking about biodynamic birth, ancient intelligence, animal bodies. Then we're going to have another round table of trainers talking about practical application of shared decision making. And then yoga teacher Beck Conant from Boston is talking about the open path that day with 40 minutes of yoga. Karen Strange, our dear friend midwife, Karen Strange, who does a lot on resuscitation, is going to talk about home birth, newborn resuscitation, skills for parents. What if the baby's born and nobody's there? So she does a very gentle presentation on a very scary situation. And then we're going to have a session on pelvic jiggling with Australian midwives Jenny Blythe and Fiona Hallinet. And our last day, Sunday, we have lawyer Hermione Hayes Klein, Restoring Justice, Healing Birth Through Human Rights and the Restoration of the Divine Feminine. She is a lawyer for the rights of parents and breech birth. And she's really talking about how human rights and human birth come together, how we need to protect both. We have a Turkish... Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, how can people register for this?
Oh, yeah. And I could go on. We have even more sessions, so including birth trauma and pushing and dance. And then I get to talk about the future of spinning babies. So how do we come to this? We come to spinningbabiesconference.com, spinningbabiesconference, all one word, .com. And then there's a registration, and you can pick a 1-day parent conference registration or a 3-day professional conference registration. The 3-day professional conference registration includes the parent registration, and everybody gets it for 90 days afterwards. Plus, we've been doing little talk sessions for people who register. Then they've been coming on Zooms with me, and we've been having really intimate conversations about whatever is on their mind. It's just beautiful.
I am so excited for this. And I'm so excited that the community can hear from these really amazing practitioners. That way they can have as many, they can have all these skills and confidence as they approach their births. Oh, Gail, thank you so much.
Deb, you're so welcome. And thank you. Thank you for being such a good friend. And I'm arcing from Minneapolis over to you in the East Coast in a great big city there.
Oh, big hugs to you. I'm so excited to connect with you during the conference. And I just always love chatting with you. It's just such a joy because our philosophies are so aligned and we both have the common goal of supporting parents. And I mean, that's just such a wonderful connection. So thank you.
I think you were the first person to reach out to us to say, hey, let's promote one another. And we're finally getting our acts together for partner affiliations. We just finished the platform this last couple of weeks. So although we've been trying to do it before, we're going to be able to do it with greater capacity now. I'm so grateful for you and your enthusiasm, Deb.
Thank you.
This has been an episode of Yoga Birth Babies, produced by Prenatal Yoga Center. You can catch us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Periscope. I'm Deb Flaschenberg. Thanks for listening.